All right. Hello, it's me, Mike, with HPDS. I'll be doing a Genesis 12 study this time around. So I'll go ahead and start with the Lord's Prayer. My Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May your kingdom come and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Please give us this day our daily bread and forgive us of our debt as we forgive those in debt to us. And Lord, lead us not into temptation, but instead deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom of power and glory, Lord, forever and ever. Amen. All right, so I'm getting into chapter 12. Let's go ahead and I'll get to reading it. Let me go ahead and point out some points to it first. Let me read some of these headings. Basically, chapter 12 is what God calls Abram. He's going to bless him with the promise of what we know to be Christ. Abram departs from Lot with Haran. No, he departs with Lot from Haran. And Abram journeys through Canaan. And then I think he makes it to Egypt in this one too. Egypt is driven by a famine into Egypt. And then Sarai is taken by Pharaoh. And then that's basically the scenario that we're going to be coming across in chapter 12. And let me go ahead and get to reading it. All right, always got to make sure for some reason. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Moreh. And the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. And there was a famine in the land. And Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there. For the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, and they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that I may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entreated Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep, and oxen, and he asses, and men servants, and maid servants, and she asses, and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues, because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram, and said, What is this thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, She is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to wife? Now therefore behold thy wife, take her, and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. Okay, so we're coming across Egypt and a Pharaoh. Suddenly there's a Pharaoh all of a sudden. So time, at this point, like we said, we came across he's about 290 years later, I think is what the number was. Abram is about almost 300 years after the flood. Not quite 300, but just getting around to about almost 300 years after the flood. So the flood happened 300 years earlier, and that's when Abram comes around. And now, granted, at this point, he leaves. He doesn't even leave his father's home until what? He's like 75 years old. Isn't that when he said that's how old he is? I don't know if it tells. Yep, right here. If we go back to verse 4. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So mind you, he's 75 years old, but based off of the numbers we came off of, if we go back to the Genesis 11 video and check out what happened in Genesis 11, we find that based off of the numbers, Shem was still alive in this time. So so this is just something that I'm pointing out because that's what's going on. This is the world. It's been a long time, but you also have like really what we would know is just mythical and fantastic scenarios going on. Like I said, if we read through when we went through chapter 9 of Genesis, when the rainbow came out, when did the rainbow come around? I don't even remember. When was the rainbow? Was it chapter 9? Chapter 8? I think it's chapter 9. Yeah, it's chapter 9, 14. Yeah. Chapter 9:14. 9:14 is what I see. So after the flood came something that happened where all of a sudden rainbows were possible. So that means rainbows are something that happens when there's, I guess, humidity in the air. So I said the way I put it in the video was something along the lines of physics had changed. But basically, thinking on it now, it seems as though something happened to where humidity was now, or humidity was a thing, I guess. It seems that way. Some happened, but rainbows became a thing. And so we have, like I said, it's a fantastic scenario where science had happened in the way the world actually existed. And now we also, at the same time, we've got Shem, who is watching as he's growing old and he's getting closer to death. We've got his family line just not living up. They're just not reaching his age. He's over here growing older and they're all dying down here, So we see something happening with the ages where even though we see a fantastic story happening, we're going to see this over the next few chapters. We're going to see Abram, and we're going to see Abram talk to God and all sorts of things where he finds favor in the Lord's eyes, and he's going to be given a promise. And in fact, in chapter 12 here, there was already the promise, right? Let's get back to it. Let me get into this. So he's already telling him. So God is talking to Abram. But mind you, the next few chapters, what I want to point out first was that the next few chapters about Abram appear to be still within the lifetime of Shem. And Shem was Noah's son. And Shem was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations up. You see what I'm saying? He was 9 generations up. And then it even based off of the numbers, I think Abram doesn't even live as long as Shem. Shem ends up, he obviously doesn't live as long as him, but I think Shem still outlives Abram. That's 9 generations up. And so like I said, this is part of that strange scenario that's going on in this time frame, that people are dying younger. It's a worldwide, not only, he didn't even see the flood, but they heard about the flood. And so they would have seen the effects of the flood, and they would have known, and they would have probably been talking about the flood. So that would have been something that they knew about. Abram knew about the flood. He'd seen its effects. He probably was seeing the land and kind of, who knows what was going on. But he also probably spoke to Shem. Shem probably, I'm sure he had spoken to him at least on occasion. They gone and spoke, and he learned. And I bet you, and I would imagine that at this time they were being gathered and being talked to, like in assemblies. They would probably have Shem speak to the assembly once every so often, you know. And I'm sure he would go, and every year, just like clockwork, he'd tell the story, and he just everybody knew it, and that was the whole thing. I would imagine that life would have been something like that. And the reason why I think that is because, you know, when I read through the rest of the Bible and what I know about my own personal life and my own personal history and what's going on in the world, that just seems to be what they'd be doing. Every year they'd be having holidays, and those holidays would be a specific holiday, and it would basically be doing the exact same thing every year with that holiday. And I would imagine, like I said, we knew that February to February, so the day of, there would have probably been a week leading up to the flood, and then there would have been the flood, the day of the flood, you know, and then there would have been the 40 days and 40 nights of rain, and then there would have been what, 150-day mark, or right, was it 150-day mark, where they'd come out to the 150 days, and then they'd have certain weeks every, you know, a week after that, a week after that, or so forth, where there'd be other new different holidays. So you would see that they'd probably be talking about that every single year come around the same year. Once again, and this is probably just speculation, but I imagine that's what it was similar to, at least as best they could do it, for as long as they could, because ultimately, when Israel is giving the same kind of directions every year, they're supposed to keep a Passover, they're supposed to keep the Day of Feast, they got all these different holidays that they're supposed to be celebrating, and they're supposed to be making sacrifices, and they're supposed to be coming together, and they're supposed to be set, you know, the Sabbath, and they got all these commands, and ultimately it just becomes too much for the people. The people just, they forget it. They can't do it. Every year they're doing it, and it seems that as they go through the history, they just don't seem to uphold all the traditions, and they forget the traditions, and they go do their own things, and that's when God punishes them. So that's what well, it's kind of what you're seeing already just happening. But you don't really recognize it, I would say, because you don't recognize the fact that the Bible doesn't necessarily, I mean, it makes it very clear if you're reading the numbers, but because people don't give it the emphasis that it is required, a lot of people don't even believe that this is, again, this is, people don't take this as historical records, and they say it's because people don't live 900 years. They say, you know, because there's no possible way that the whole world could flood. They have excuses like that. They have, you know, all kinds of reasons. But the numbers make it very clear that Shem was still alive. You know, he was still alive. And in fact, Noah was probably still alive almost up to Abram's time. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to go check those numbers. I don't think so entirely, but actually he may have. Noah, just, I'm thinking about the numbers, and it looks like Noah may have actually seen the birth of Abram. He may have seen Abram and then died shortly thereafter, I think, based off of the numbers, because I think it says he lived 300 years after the flood, and Abram was born about 292 years after the flood, something along those lines. So I think he got to see Abram grow up to be a very young child, compared to a 900-year-old man, for sure. Um, but maybe he saw him even grow older. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to go look at the numbers, like I said, because I think he got to 900. He got 350 years. So that means he would have actually lived another one until Abram was like 60 something years old. He may have seen him. So my numbers may have even been giving him may not have given him as much credit. So so Abram got to talk to these guys. You know, he got to know from the firsthand experience, or at least he got to be up there probably in the assemblies. He would have gone to the festivals. He probably obviously was, he could have been very well been, maybe he wasn't, maybe it was before his time, but he very well could have been there at that Tower of Babel. Noah would have probably been at that Tower of Babel, perhaps, and Shem probably would have been at it. Some of these guys, there's a lot of these names being listed right now that they may have been at the Tower of Babel back then. They were helping. They could have been helping to build the tower themselves. Who knows? It doesn't give us a time frame of when the towers were around, but it does seem to have been around this, probably before Abram came around, or just around, Abram's lifetime, perhaps even. It's one of those things. Don't really know. But that's what's going on right now. And so I guess that's if you're gonna put yourself in their positions. So God's calling him, he's telling him. So now, and that's why you have to take all that into consideration to be like, well, why is God calling Abram out? Wow, I'm just getting into the first verse. So calls Abram out of all of that. Like I said, he would have been in Ur of the Chaldees, which, let me take a look at this map again. He would have been somewhere around here, and here's the Tower of Babel up here, somewhere in Babylon right here. And these were all Nimrod's kingdoms. So Nimrod was a great hunter. Like I said, he was based off of what he was becoming a mighty man. So he was becoming like those giants again. He was probably becoming possessed by demons. This is, again, these people are just wicked. As soon as they can, the people become wicked again. This is a theme that we're seeing already. But he promises, get out of those, come away from your family. Come away. That's what Abram is saying. That's what God is telling Abram, to come on, get out of your father's house. And I do think later on we do find out that his father was an idolater. They were already they were getting into idolatry. I forget where that is. But it isn't in Genesis, and I think it isn't until we get further into the Bible, into the books somewhere in the Old Testament. I think they talk about him being an idolater, and can't remember where, but God is telling Abram to get out of there. Just get out of there. Go ahead and leave your family, because look at the kind of family you've already got. You're living amongst giants over there. They're becoming wicked. They're becoming right away. Abram would have been a young guy, relatively young. He was only 75 years old compared to these 900-year mythical figures, 800-year-old mythical figures. You know what I'm saying? He was a young little kid compared to them. And so God was taking this young child, which would have been Abram, and he was basically saying, look, kid, you don't know how bad these people are yet. You don't even know how bad they are. So before you do, come on out. Get out of there. Get out of there. You're living in a bad crowd. That's really what's going on here. And you got to take that into consideration, that's, like I said, that's what's going on. Get out of there. That's what God is telling us. Just get out of there. And I'm going to make you a great nation, and I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you, and curse them that curse you. And in thee all families of the earth shall be blessed. And this is a hint at what comes out of his line, which is going to be Jesus Christ. When Jesus Christ is born, he's basically a direct descendant from Abraham. And a spiritual descendant. So it's going to be interesting that we see that. But of course, that isn't until we get into the New Testament. There's a lot of history up until this into Jesus Christ. There's a lot of history, but from the very beginning, Genesis is hinting at him. And he was also hinted at, we haven't gotten to Melchizedek, but also he was hinted as early as Genesis 2. They were getting into talking about him. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So let me go ahead and take this map again. Actually, I think I got a better one. Let's go to pictures, the Bible, and where is Abram's travels? I think this is the one that's Abram's travels. You can see he comes out of Ur, and so he's in Haran. So he's kind of way up there. See, if you think about that, here's the Ararat. This is Turkey, so he's getting into like southern Turkey. So Abram and his father make it quite a bit up there. Look at that. That looks to be about, let's see, about right there, 300, about 600, about 700, 800, 900 miles. That's a it's quite a distance that they make it on foot. You got to keep that in mind too. They're on foot. So he's in Haran, and I guess let's see, he goes out, um, and I think by this point his father is dead, but I'm not entirely sure. But Abram leaves, and he takes Lot. He takes his nephew with him because it sounds like his brother dies, and I think we hear that in Genesis 11. We come across it in Genesis 11. Let's see. It said it right here. And Terah took Abram his son and Lot the son of her. So Terah is taking Abram and Lot, and he's basically raising them. They're like brothers. They're being raised like brothers. But it sounds like, where was it? Lot's father dies early, and Terah died in Haran. And I don't remember where I read about Tehran dying early. But he was a young guy, it seems like, or he also, I mean, they were all young and dying. They were just young kids dying, so the elders just weren't able to keep them alive. And it seems like that's probably what God was showing them. You elders can't keep these young ones alive. I as God, keep them alive. That's what God was telling them. But yeah, so he leaves. He's 75 years old. He takes Lot. He takes his wife, Sarai. Right now their name is Sarai. And they take everything they have and everything they had in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came, and Abram passed through the land of Sichem right there. Morah and the Canaanite was in the land. And so he's getting into the land of the Canaanites, which is, there's that Shechem right there in Hebron. He goes, so you could see where he's going. Abram travels to Canaan. So he goes down here. So that's where he's going. Let's take a look at this one. This one's got a little bit kind of more detailed on the map. It's got all these names, but this is it right here. This is what's going to become of Israel. That's Israel. And let's take a look at one more. Oh, look, see, there's a bunch of the Canaanites. Palestine, Canaanites, Hittites. So these are kind of the Amorites, the Ammonites, Moabites. These are all throughout different histories. So, but that's where he's going into. This is the land of Canaan. And this is kind of important because this is where Israel is basically, Canaan becomes Israel. So the land of Canaan will be the country of Israel. Basically, even as we know it today, Israel is what was originally called the land of Canaan. And if you remember, Canaan was the guy that was cursed by Noah back in chapter 9. Chapter 9, chapter 8, chapter 9. Chapter 8 or 9, I'm already, but Canaan is the one that is cursed by Noah. And Noah, this is, I mean, at this point, you could see it. So here's Canaan over in this land. For some reason, he's already established this land of Canaan. And now you've got this Shem coming in here, the line of Shem, which is Abram. Abram is the line of Shem. And what was the curse? I guess I do got to find it. It had to be in Genesis 8 or 9. Let me take a look if I can find it, because this curse is kind of important now that I think about it, when we think about what's going on here with Abram. So Noah leaves the ark. Okay, so it's chapter 9. Has to be chapter 9. And yep, Ham. So 22, 23, so I think it's 24, 25. And he said, cursed be Canaan. So this is 9:25. And he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. So that's what he says. So he's going to be a servant on his brethren. And then we get into later on, God shall enlarge Japheth and shall dwell in the tents of Shem and Canaan. So we got, once again, the tents of Shem. And here's Abram, which is the line of Shem. And that's where I get into. This is going to be the tents. He's going to start pulling up the tents. And we're gonna see that the let's see, God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. So Japheth is gonna dwell in the tents of Shem. So who are Japheths? So if we take a look at this, let me see if I can find it. Here it is, the genealogy. Japheth. Here's Japheth. So these guys are gonna dwell in the tents of Shem. And we're gonna see that through Abram. Abram is basically the real tents of Shem that we're gonna be looking at. So we're gonna have these guys are gonna dwell in these tents, and these guys are gonna be servants to them. That's what we're seeing, right? That is what Noah's curse was. That is the curse. That's the bad. That's what he's seen. But it's also prophetic because Noah says it, and Noah was a righteous man at that time. God was making sure that every word that came out of his mouth was true. God does that. That is God that does that. If you are a righteous man, it is God that makes sure that all words that come out of your mouth are truthful and that they happen and they become a reality. That is God that does that for the righteous. And that's why, that's why it's so important. Our words are so important. Like here I am speaking, and I understand that. And I just keep praying to God that he uses me to make it known, to make the gospel known. And this is all part of the gospel. It isn't just the New Testament. It isn't just, Jesus Christ is ultimately the goal of this, but this is the early history, and this is the path. This is the path. Jesus Christ is the only way, and that's it. He is the way. He is the only way. That's what Jesus Christ is. And this already we're already seeing the path that he built. And this is part of that path. He's talking about all these genealogies, and that's why there's so many of them listed. And I know sometimes it seems boring for people that, aren't very passionate about the Bible or aren't as passionate about the Bible, that they got all these names and they don't know what the names mean, and they don't understand what it means and what do the numbers mean. Well, this is what it's doing. It's establishing credibility and showing the numbers, and it's showing what's going to happen. God is predicting the future, and he let Noah predict the future. He's like, here you go, Noah, you made that curse and that blessing that you did back in chapter 11, and God is going to make sure that they come true. Or chapter 9, that he did that when he did that in chapter 9. And so here we're seeing that right now in chapter 12. We've got he's seen that he's in the land of Canaan. So Abram is making his way into the land of Canaan. So this is one step closer to that particular prophecy coming out of Noah coming to life. Abram is now in the land of Canaan, and the Canaanites are going to serve the line of Shem as servants. So the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord who appeared to him. So just like I was saying, the Canaanites are going to become servants of Shem, which is Abraham. So, which is from the line that Abraham is from. So right away, now we're seeing that in verse 7, where God is telling them, I'm going to give you this land. Here, all this land that's right in front of you, I'm going to give it to you, this land of Canaan. So Abram hears this, or he sees this, he appeared to him. So God is appearing to Abram right now. Earlier it was, how did he come to it? First, the Lord says unto Abram, get out of your, so he's calling him. He's saying, he's talking to him. But over here, we got it more clear that he appeared to him. So you're seeing that what's going on is when Abram was way over here, he could hear God. God was calling to him. Now that he's down here, God appears to him. So you see, now that he's in what we know as the Holy Land of Israel, which was Canaan at the time, now he sees him. So over here in Ur, this part in Babylonia of Ur, he hears him, comes up the river to Haran, comes back down over in Israel, which is the land of Canaan, and he sees God. The Lord appears to him and said, and that's when he appears to him and tells him, I'm going to give you all this land. So Abram goes ahead and he actually builds an altar there. So it's a memorial. So you see where there's a special place that Abram was just hanging out, and then God shows up, like visibly shows up to him. And after the whole interaction, Abram decides this is so important that I need to build an altar here. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. So you see, he's making two altars. He builds an altar there, and then he removed from thence into a mountain of Bethel. And so let's take a look at where he is. Bethel is up here. There's that Hai. It's spelled Hai, but here it's only spelled Ai. So he's right around here somewhere, and he builds a couple of altars here. Let me see. Maybe it tells me. Oh, first he was in Shechem, and that's where he goes. He was in Shechem unto the plain of Morah, and that's when the Lord appears to him. He builds an altar. Then he removed from thence, and then he goes to Bethel, having Bethel on the west and Hai. Okay, so he was in Shechem. So that's that place, Shechem, right there. Here's a different map. Let me see this map. What's a good map? That's not the map I'm looking for. Shechem. That's that same country, though. That's that same place. Yeah, so they're there. Let me see if I can find a better map, though. I think this is the one. Salem. No, these are. But basically, he's there in that Shechem, and then he goes down to the Bethel and Ai. So this is the map, I guess I'm looking. He's up here first, and then he builds one in this place, Shechem, and then he builds another one right here in between Bethel and Ai. So these are going to be important because he does come back to them later, I believe. But he builds two of them because where God appeared to him, and then he moved a little bit somewhere else, and he wanted to talk to God. So he makes another altar, and he calls upon the name of the Lord. So you can see that he's kind of learning how to communicate with God. So he goes and he sees God, and he sees him out in Shechem. So God's out there hanging out in Shechem, and he sees him in person. He goes down to Bethel, he makes another altar, and he calls upon the name of the Lord. And so God is proving himself that I can hear you anywhere you are, little Abram. I am God. I am everlasting. I am the one. He's telling them, and he's there in physical being, in a physical presence. So now when we say God, he was seeing him. He was appearing to him as some sort of person, not as some sort of creature, some sort of being. I guess you would really say a being. He was showing himself and making himself visible. And so then he's also going out there, and when he's no longer visible, when God has removed his visibility from Abram, here's Abram in Bethel, and he makes the altar, and he calls upon the name of the Lord. Because remember, at the very beginning, God had called unto him from such a far distance, back when Abram was still out in Haran and back in Ur when he was way over there. So Abram realizes that God can hear him, and he can hear God from long distances. Even though that's something that we think may be almost impossible, but you could do it with phones and stuff. But here God is doing it naturally. Him and Abram are speaking to each other. And so Abram kept going south, and there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous. And when he came into near Egypt, he said unto Sarah his wife, Behold, now I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. He's calling her pretty. He says, I know you're pretty good looking. You're very good looking. Therefore it shall come to pass when the Egyptians shall see thee, they shall say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well for me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. So let's go back to this map and see what's going on, because what's going on is he's making his way into Egypt. So he's going to go down here, and he's going to actually keep going into Egypt. And so apparently when he's getting into Egypt, let's go back to this genealogy. Who were the Egyptians? I know I've seen the Egyptians somewhere up here, but I can't remember. I gotta go take a look at who the Egyptians were. Babylonian, Philistines, Amorites. I don't know which one of these would have been the Egyptians, but I know I have seen I know I've seen it. Oh, look, here it is, Mizraim. Basically, these guys, Ludum, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtuhim, so Patrusim. So these guys, more than likely, were the ones, not necessarily the Philistines, but these guys. And you could even kind of tell they do sound a little Egyptian, especially that Anamim, that Lehabim, Naphtuhim. Yeah, that almost seems kind of like the Egyptian sounding. But anyway, so these guys, which are Ham, and once again, they were going to be servants. Remember, these guys, Canaan was going to be completely servants of these guys. So these are the cousins. So even the cousins are obviously showing themselves to be also, hey, we're more closely related to Canaan, and so we would serve Shem. That's how it seems to be, that they're intermixing over here, and they themselves are becoming Canaanites just by blood, just because of proximity and going back and forth and so forth. It just was something that was common. It's common in today's world. It's not like you don't have people running from country to country doing the exact same thing, leaving babies and children and having lustful affairs and doing stuff like that. It just seems to be something that humans do. But so he seems to make it down to Egypt. Here he goes. He goes into Egypt, and as he's getting closer to Egypt, he must be noticing that, like, this isn't something that he's had to worry about. It's not like he seemed to worry about it coming into the land of Canaan. It's not like it's something he worried about back in Haran. But as he's coming closer and closer to Egypt, he's finding out something's going on with these Egyptians. And these Egyptians do something with the women. And they take the women. Clearly, they take the women for the Pharaoh. Pharaoh takes all the women, it seems like. Pharaoh comes around and he just takes all the pretty women. It seems that way. It looks like he's coming into a place that has a harem. And so that's what's going on. Is Abram's getting closer, and people are probably telling him, like, ooh, you got a pretty wife there. You better take care of her unless Pharaoh takes her. And they're like, and he'd be like, what are you talking about? Who's Pharaoh? They'd be like, oh, don't you know who Pharaoh is? Such and such. And he's all, well, I've never heard that guy. Well, you better be careful. He might take your wife as well. And he's like, okay. And it's probably not the first time. As he's getting closer and closer to Egypt, these people might be telling him that, or he's making it obvious. So that's why he tells her, I pray thou art my, tell these people that we're just brother and sister, because he's going to, it is something that's true. They're actually half brother and half sister. So it is something that it kind of explains why she's barren. And a lot of people, well, it does say later on that this kind of an affair is something that they're not supposed to have. This is an ancestral affair between Abram and Sarai. And it is said somewhere later, do not sleep with your sister. Don't sleep with your brother. It's something bad. It's incest. You will be shunned from your people. And I think that is their curse for that, is to be kind of like separated. They'd be kind of like segregated from the people. They're kind of isolated, I guess, is kind of what that curse is. And like I said, I don't know where that is just yet. I just remember coming across it, and I got to go find it. It's in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, something like that, one of those. But it has to do with the fact that brother and sister shouldn't be sleeping together, and here they are married. So there was something going on, and that's probably. But at the same time, you got to wonder what how it's part of, if you think about the curse that was put, the was actually the blessing that God placed upon um, Noah and his children was the be fruitful, multiply, and cover the face. They were given that blessing, um, and of course, what were they supposed to do? Not eat blood, right? Don't eat the blood of the meat, uh, and they were also supposed to pay back the blood. So they're supposed to be keeping track of the blood here. So it's not really talking about Abram. Abram was clearly, he was favored by God and he was chosen by God, but it doesn't necessarily say um, what was going on with Abram at the time. But he was having an affair. He was clearly with his sister, and it could have just been the part of the culture at the time that it was just a lot of incest like that was just happening because it had to happen because of the numbers, but um, it may not also be the case. But for whatever reason, that could have been part of the reason why God was calling him out of his country and out of his family to begin with, because there may be something going on with his family. But then again, like I said, there was also only a few cousins that they had there was only three bloodlines coming out of that ark to begin with. Um, but Abram here is smart enough, and he was smart. He was right. Pharaoh sees Sarah. She's really pretty. She's very good looking. He takes her and puts him in his harem. And so, of course, now she's got a time seeing what's going on in that harem. Uh, but the Pharaoh does at least treat Abram well for her sake. Like he's over here thinking that, hey, I better keep her brother safe because I got this pretty, and I'm basically thinking about taking her as another wife, yet another wife. And, he's going to, when he does that, he's going to basically take control of all of Abram's stuff with it. Like basically all of Abram's stuff becomes my stuff. And so he's kind of, Abram's probably real good with that things anyway. He's also, he's walked with God. He's talked with God. This Pharaoh probably didn't. Pharaoh was probably just one of the early families. They probably just took off long ago. They'd been way out here all this time. They'd forgotten about God, maybe. Who knows? But clearly, this guy was acting out like a king. He was acting like Pharaoh, which he's might as well be like Nimrod, and on the other side of the other side of the Holy Land over there in Shinar, where the Tower of Babel was. So it's one of those things that it gets interesting because there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, a lot of things can happen in 100 years, and this has been 300 years. This is about 300, more than 300 years already, 375 just about. And there was Abram 375 years later, so out there in Egypt, and God is watching out for him, even though God is somehow up there in Shechem right now. I mean, that's the last time Abram saw him, was up here in this Shechem, right up here, which is not over here in Egypt, where he had made it all the way out to Egypt. So, but you got to remember, God was apparently, Abram was able to talk with him, like on a cell phone, like on a mobile phone, like on a walkie-talkie, something like that. He was talking to him. He could hear him, and he was understanding that. And so that's why he's even recognizing that God is even watching out for Abram and his wife, that they're in Egypt. And, suddenly there's some plagues coming upon Pharaoh. So this is going to be the first time that we see Pharaoh getting plagued. And that Pharaoh, he's going to get plagued again in they're not learning their lessons out there in Egypt is what God is, he's giving them lessons too. But, so Pharaoh is acting like a god. He's acting that's what Pharaoh was. He was thinking he was God. He was a god. That's what he thought. I'm a living god. That's what Pharaoh did. So here is the real God, plaguing Pharaoh for the sake of a righteous man, that righteous man being Abram. And so but of course he's there, and so Pharaoh finally finds out, and he's, so what are you doing? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? And why did you tell me that she was your sister? Now I was gonna take her to be my wife, but now I can't. So go take her and get out of here. And so Pharaoh probably was really embarrassed, probably really, really scared. Maybe he could have been scared. The fear of God could have come upon him. He could have been really embarrassed. It could have been a combination of both. He was clearly just get out of here. Take everything that you got and get out of here, is what he told them. And so, and he told all his people, don't do anything to them. Just let them get out of here. And that's what it happens. And that's the end of chapter 12. So chapter 12's got a lot going on. A lot going on. But that's the summary is ultimately Abram is coming out of Haran. He goes into the land of Canaan on his way to the land of Egypt. And while he's in Canaan, he sees God, and God tells him, hey, I'm going to give you this land. I'm going to give you this land. It's going to belong to you. And it was just as he was passing by, that's what it was. He was, so you think of it like the story of an immigrant. He's basically an immigrant, just walking. He's out here, he comes out here. As he's passing through the town, this one particular town is a special town. It's a real special area, because in that area, a man comes up to him, and he said, and that man is, hey, I'm God. And he's like, oh, wow, you're God. You're the guy I heard way out there in my homeland. You're the reason why I'm here. And God's all like, yeah, I'm gonna give you all this land. And he's all, wow, are you kidding me? And he's like, no, I'm gonna give it all to you. And Abram's like, oh, cool. And so he builds an altar there, and then God disappears on him. And then so Abram builds another altar a little bit close by, and he talks to God. He starts calling upon God. God can hear him, and he's talking to God just like he had been talking. So he showed himself once, and then, he just kept talking to him. And he's like, all right, cool. I got to get down to Egypt because of how bad the famine is right now. He gets down there. Pharaoh's like, give me your girl, or I'm going to take her for my wife. And he takes Sarah, and he's like, hey, after a while, God is just plaguing him because God is showing his might over this. Once again, this man is claiming to be a god. Pharaoh is a living god. He's so lost and detached. It's only been 300 years since the flood. Mind you, it's only been about 370, something like that. Almost 400 years. That's it. That's all it has been. It's not very long. Shem was probably still alive for most of that time. And, he was alive for 500 years after Arphaxad. So, yeah, Shem was still alive. And, Shem was there. Shem was in the boat. Shem was in the ark. These people had no excuse to not know God. They should have been there with God. They should have known who God was. But this guy was like, "Hey, I'm Pharaoh. I'm a living God. Give me your girl. I got a harem. I'm gonna do all this stuff with my harem." And then he finds, so God curses him. Like Abram comes in. Abram knew who God was. Abram had been in the presence of God. This evil Pharaoh, was obviously feeling the pains that just from Abram being close by to him, he would have just been feeling it. And that's why he gave him all his money, basically gave him a bunch of stuff, only to say, I'm embarrassed because I gave you all my stuff thinking I was going to sleep with this woman and make her my wife. And then all of a sudden I find out she's your wife, and you're a scary guy, and you're real, probably he's real forceful in word. Probably just diminished the Pharaoh personality wise because God was with him. But God was just physically, like it says, he was clearly plaguing him. So God was physically plaguing him pretty badly too. So it was just a number of things going on. And something happened where he clearly gets embarrassed, gets angry, and just sends him away. Just forget, he just called it a wash. It was just a bust for him. Just take it and leave. Pharaoh lost a lot on that. It was a loss. It was a complete loss for Pharaoh. lost all the stuff that he gave to Abram, and he lost the woman too, and he just told him to get out. It was just total loss for Pharaoh, and Abram just took it. It just took off. And we do find out later that Abram, by 13, Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And, go figure. And I know I've said it before in a different video, it really shows the how much a pretty woman is worth, just how much a beautiful woman is worth. And Abram apparently had a beautiful woman, and granted, she's gonna be beautiful her whole life. I mean, she's gonna be 99 years old, and they're still trying to take her. She's 70 something years old at this point. She's something like 70 something, 80 something years old at this point, and they're still like looking at her because she was young looking. Why was she young looking at 80 years old, 99 years old? Because they were young. They were children, if you think about it, compared to how old Shem was, compared to how old Noah lived, compared to how Adam and Eve, they were children. And so she still looked very young, and she still looked beautiful. She was in her 80s or 90 years old, 80s years old when this happens. And she's still beautiful. The Pharaoh's still like looking at her. Look, she's pretty. I'll take her to be my wife. That's the kind of time. That's the kind of time that they were living in. Anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and end this video. Go ahead and say, and God bless you to anybody who may be watching, and I pray we all bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. Amen.